Hi there guys, I got lent a Beat Buddy by a friend of mine, not to do a review of it as such, but just to see what I kind of thought of it. It's cool, it's fun, it sounds pretty good. It's got a very simple user interface on the unit itself, but you can make it astoundingly complicated if you want to use the app. So if you want to start changing the drum kits, not so much to load in the files, that's relatively simple, but just making tweaks to the kits themselves, you start getting into things like general MIDI mapping and velocity control of which sample it's triggering and all this kind of stuff. It becomes a lot more complex. Things to avoid double hits of certain MIDI map notes and that kind of stuff. So you can make it as complicated as you want, but as a basic thing, it's relatively simplistic. Almost to a fault, because you can't program any patterns from the unit itself. There's no functionality for that. You'd have to use an app, you'd have to use music software to program the MIDI files themselves. So it's a super simple thing if you want to just use the internal patterns, and you can change the kits really easily, and I'm going to show you what the kits sound like right now. This form factor is obviously aimed squarely at guitarists or maybe bass players. It's got a dry through for the guitar itself, you've got an input here. The only time I could possibly see that being useful is if you were maybe busking into some kind of acoustic amp and you have a limited number of channels. So you'd have your acoustic guitar going into one channel, your vocals into the other, and of course you wouldn't have anything to put the drums into. So you could put your guitar and drums on the same channel. Less than ideal, because obviously it's got a shared EQ, but that's the only reason I could think of that you would actually put your guitar through this. If you're an electric guitarist, it doesn't make any sense at all, because putting drums into an electric amp you're just not going to get the most from it. It needs to have a full range sound. An electric guitar amp is going to roll off at about maybe, I don't know, between 5,000 and 8,000, and certainly roll off a lot higher than the bass drum is going to want to go down to. So you're going to want to put it into a PA, not a guitar amp. The other reason is, if you're an electric guitarist, you might be running distortion on the amp, and then your drums would come out distorted. So the form factor is a kind of a bizarre one to me, because it's in the pedal board, and that's obviously to do with the foot switch operation, but you're actually running the signal into another source. So it's just a shared power source. That's the only benefit you're getting. All drum machines, as far as, the readily available ones, not the early, one-off things like the Lindrum and that kind of stuff, but they all had a foot switch operation where you'd have a start-stop and a fill and all that kind of stuff. So you're not necessarily gaining anything by having it in a foot switch form factor, other than the fact that you don't have to have an extra wall wart. But then if you're not sending it to a guitar source, you can send it to a PA, maybe you don't want it in the pedal board, and especially with the extension foot switch, it's going to take up an awful lot of space, real estate in your pedal board. So my thought is, what's it for? That's the tricky thing, and that's what I couldn't really work out, to be honest. As a singer-songwriter tool, you'd probably just go VST drums now, because it's a lot easier. If you want to program this with a specific pattern, you've got to do it in a DAW anyway. So why would you not just use a VST, VST drummer? The sample size of a VST drummer is vastly larger than this. This is 100 megabyte for the entirety of a kit. That's the sample size. Well, Easy Drummer would be like 250 for a small kit and way over 300 for one of the bigger ones. So the sample size is a lot smaller. The kits themselves are okay. I actually like the electronic ones. Whenever I use something like this, I always like to use it for what it is rather than what it isn't. So rather than try and replicate the sound of an acoustic kit, I always like to use a drum machine to make electronic drums, because that's unusual, and then you're just using it for an unusual texture rather than trying to replicate, real drums. I think that one of the best uses for this device would be as a really great practice tool, as a metronome. Easy access to the tempo, and you can change different kits and that kind of stuff to make it more interesting than just practicing to a metronome. And I think that's probably where this thing sits best, is as a really great practice tool. Or maybe you jam with a bunch of friends and none of you play drums, and you just want something to loop around to keep you all in time, so that you can have fun. You're not gigging it, but you need something just, say it's you and a mate, and your mate plays bass. Well, it sounds a little odd when a guy's playing lead guitar over just bass. It's a bit empty. Something like this could be a fun thing to do. So there are uses for it. As a live gigging tool, I'm not sure anyone gigs drum machines anymore. I could be completely wrong. Please post in the comments if you do use these things. There's apparently quite a community of people that use these Beat Buddy devices, and they do sound cool. So I've done a couple of jams with it, and I've also done a little section here where I'm using it in terms of a practice tool, using a Boss OC3, and just to split the guitar, that the bottom two strings would then be the octave down, and I've got a bit of a shimmering kind of effect on the top strings, just as a fun thing to do with it. And I think that this is where it's best suited. So anyway, cool device. I hope you dug the video. If you did, give me a like, share, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I'm posting stuff every single week. You've got chopped videos on one week, and videos like this where I just try something, or it might be a gear review or whatever it is. Something music related on the other week as well. All right, see you again later.